Welcome to this session focused on very much getting us all moving again, or as the title says, back in the air. My name's Guy Johnson. I'm one of the Bloomberg anchors. Thank you for joining us today. The fact that we're all doing this virtually tells us that there is probably significant work still to be done. Progress thus far, limited, and I would argue regional. We need to turn a narrow body recovery into a wide body recovery. Short haul to long haul, I guess you could probably put it. While we may get back in the air as well, it's unlikely that we're going back to what we had before. Business models have already been altered significantly and will continue to be altered. Business travel and freight, obviously two areas where we may see significant change. Does first class survive the pandemic? And then there's the issue of sustainability, with the pandemic providing an opportunity, hopefully, to accelerate the green revolution. Joining us now, we've only got 30 minutes. It's a fantastic panel. We have His Excellency Akbar the Group CEO, of course, of Qatar Airways, Luis Gallego, the CEO of the IAG Group. We've got Yvonne, Manzi, Makolo, the CEO of Rwandair, and Dave Calhoun, the President and CEO of the Boeing Company. Now, I've got a couple of questions I'm going to be asking the panelists. I'm going to ask the first one first, because I think it kind of sets the scene quite nicely for us. What is your attitude towards international travel? The answers are fairly straightforward. I would get on a flight tomorrow. I'm certainly in that camp. Or I don't feel comfortable yet traveling internationally. We have, as I say, thus far seen progress being fairly limited. We are seeing regional pickups, certainly in the United States. I saw the TSA data for the United States yesterday, very, very strong. We're getting a really good, solid regional recovery. We're starting to see that pick up in Europe as well. China has had a very strong domestic recovery as well, but international travel remains fairly limited. So we'll bring up the panelists, we'll bring up the answers to that as it starts to come through. There you go. That's the answer I think we're all looking for. I would get on a flight tomorrow 70+%, 75%, 25% though, still not feeling comfortable getting on a flight. But the vast majority of people certainly looking like they are looking to get back on an aeroplane fairly soon. The impediment at the moment does feel, therefore, largely to be coming from governments and the fact that we don't have a joined-up system for making this happen. Your Excellency, let me start with you in Doha. Are you frustrated by the lack of progress?
I'm extremely frustrated because what is happening every day is that governments are changing protocols of who they will let enter and who they will put in quarantine and who they will restrict from entering their countries. Different requirements for vaccination, for the tests, the COVID tests. So this is really confusing the airline and the passengers. And I hope that the government realize that they are damaging not only their economies, but they're also damaging the aviation industry as a whole.
In terms of when you think we're going to see change, Luis, let me bring you into the conversation. Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, saying that it'll be next year before we get back to travel being normal. Is that the kind of timeline you're working to? And are you frustrated as well?
Yes, I think the situation that we have right now, we cannot allow anymore. I think vaccinated people should be able to travel freely. Vaccines are effective in protecting people, and we need all the governments to be more ambitious. We need the world to come back and to protect economies and to protect jobs. So I think, for example, what we see now that is happening in EU is a good movement. I think from the 1st of July, vaccinated people or those with negative tests or recover from COVID will be able to travel. And I think here in UK, we need to follow that approach. I think the traffic light system is not working, and we need a system fit for purpose. So we need to see vaccinated people traveling. We don't want quarantines. I think they are not working anymore. And tests, in case they are needed, must be affordable and simple.
Dave, at the moment it feels very regional, though. That seems to be certainly the narrative that is developing. We've just heard Luis talking about what is happening in Europe. We can see what's happening in the United States. We can see what's happening in China. But it does feel very regional. Is this going to be, and how long will it remain so, a narrow body recovery? What needs to happen to make this a wide body recovery?
Well, it's the same issue that was just discussed with, of course, our customers. I think the domestic recoveries in these large developed countries are a testament to the effectiveness of our vaccine and the confidence that the flying public has in the vaccine, because they're coming back in a very robust way. I think the folks that are trying to organize the international protocols here have to look hard at that and follow the vaccine. So vaccinated people from all around the world should be able to travel to one another's countries. And I think that is the way it will develop, but we've got to get a little less politics involved and a little more science, because these vaccines are in fact effective.
Yvonne, you've got quite a lot of experience dealing with this. Rwanda obviously has had to deal with not only COVID-19, but also Ebola. You learned a lot from that experience. What can you tell us about that experience, how it's transferred into the COVID experience, and what you think, therefore, the measures needed to return people to air travel likely look like?
Well, we had Ebola within the region, so right next door in the DRC. So the government put in place the basic infrastructure to handle that pandemic, and that infrastructure is really what has been repurposed for this current pandemic, the COVID pandemic. So in terms of beds in hospitals, in terms of testing capabilities, training of personnel from a disinfection perspective, proper use of PPE, all that has really helped the country in terms of dealing with the current pandemic. And Rwanda has been at the forefront in terms of containing this pandemic. But the most important thing has really been the trust issue, the trust in science, the citizens trusting the government, and therefore implementing the protocols that have been put in place. That translated very well for the airline as well, because very early on, a year before COVID started, we already had thermal cameras in our airports. We were already disinfecting heavily our aircrafts because we were flying to some of these countries, and we were able to be trained very quickly by the Ministry of Health as well. And in order for us to get out of this, and the rest of the panelists have mentioned it, vaccinated people should be allowed to travel freely, and those who are not vaccinated, as long as they have negative COVID certificates, they should be allowed to travel. Otherwise, all these arbitrary rules which are being put in place and quarantining which is being put in place is really disrupting the industry, and it'll take a lot longer for us to recover.
Okay. Your Excellency, the sense I'm getting from all of you is that we need to lean on science. The vaccines are the way to reopen travel. We need to make sure that the protocols line up. Why is that not happening, Your Excellency? Why are governments not stepping up? When you talk to governments around the world, when you're talking about trying to make this happen, how much feedback are you getting? How many conversations are you having with government? Because certainly the airlines that I talk to in Europe are finding it really a huge struggle to kind of connect with governments and make the point. Are you struggling with that as well?
All the airlines and the CEOs are in the same boat. We are all struggling with authorities who keep on not making their mind exactly what they want. I do understand, like all of my colleagues mentioned about vaccinating people and allowing people who are vaccinated to travel freely. But the problem is, until you really get the masses vaccinated, you will keep on getting mutations, and the mutations will then keep getting waves of the third wave or fourth wave or fifth wave. And this continuously happening will let the governments, again, to tighten their belts. The example is the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Boris Johnson mentioned that he was going to open up on the 17th of June. Now it is 18th of July. And this could again extend once they see the Delta variant increasing in the United Kingdom, and so are in other countries. But the problem is that until the biggest markets in the world don't open up, Brazil, China, India, we will keep on having a depression in the long-haul travel. And for us, yes, big countries like United States and China and India can open up their domestic markets. But when you have a hub and spoke operation and you want people to travel long haul, it has to be a consistent protocol of how you will treat the vaccinated people and how you'll open up the countries and the markets.
Dave Calhoun, another way of looking at this is that this is protectionism. Is that the correct way of perceiving what is going on?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't use that word. I think it's fear and the lack of information. Look, political interests, government interests, they're looking at the flying public and they're having a trust discussion with them. And they want to ensure that they don't step over the line on that subject. And so they're a little fearful of making the right decision. So I think Akbar's comments are perfectly accurate. The penetration of vaccines around the world is going to take time. It may not be until the end of next year before we get enough penetration broadly to accept vaccines and it has a meaningful impact on intercontinental traffic. But at the same time, there are protocols that can and should be agreed on. My hope is that there'll be a number of bilateral arrangements.
We may have just lost Dave there, so we'll move on.
For others?
Oh, there you go. You're back. Sorry, Dave, you just froze for a moment. Carry on the thought.
Sorry, yeah, just at the North Atlantic, if they can develop bilateral protocols with all of the respective countries, my hope is it becomes a template and a good template for many other routes around the world. But this will take time. This is tough to sort out, and there's no multilateral mechanism to make it happen quickly.
My kind of attempt to ask that question and talk about protection is that my fear, certainly, and I'm hearing this being talked about, is that this will linger. This sort of resistance, this antipathy towards travel is something that is going to become more embedded in the way that governments think about the way that they approach different regions. And I'm slightly fearful that this could become a new normal, particularly when it comes to Asia, particularly when it comes to China. Luis, when you look at what is happening here, do you think that there is going to be a return to global travel, that globalization is going to continue to move people around the world? Or do you think that the pandemic is going to change and alter government's approach, that they are going to make it harder to travel, that it is going to be part of a wider narrative in terms of the way that we reshore, become more domestically focused, more regionally focused? Luis, do you worry that that could become part and parcel of the narrative here?
Yes, I'm worried about that, but I think what we need is that everybody takes the decision based in scientific data, not based in political reasons. So from my point of view, it's very difficult to explain why Europe now is open to the US traffic and UK is not open with the same data. So it's clear that we are not following scientific data. So I think that's what we need to follow. It's going to be impossible to have zero risk. We need to manage risk. We know a lot of that in aviation. And what we have to do is to open the corridors that it makes sense. So for example, you know that we are pushing very hard to open the UK-US corridor. It doesn't make any sense with the successful rollout of vaccination in both countries that we are still waiting for that. And we are losing a lot of money every day. So I think we have a lot of pent-up demand. When we put flights, we see that everybody wants to fly. Even business traffic is coming back slowly, but it's coming back. So I think what we have is scientific data approach.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is this feels increasingly political and less scientific. And that, I think, is a cause of concern long-term for the industry. Let's talk about the business mix and how it is going to change. We've got a great panel question that we can put out there to the audience. What is the future of business travel? More selective trips than before, back to pre-pandemic levels to make up for lost in-person time, or a total drop-off with video technology cementing a virtual approach? While we wait for the results of that coming through from the audience, Your Excellency, let me ask you that question. How does business travel come back? Will business travel come back? Does first class also survive the pandemic?
First and foremost, let me tell you that at Qatar Airways, we have done away with first class. And we have a product in business class that is really equivalent to most of the first class of all the airlines in the world. So what we are looking is, first and foremost, business travel will certainly come back because businessmen, they like to face people, they like to feel people, they like to have to notice the body language. People, they don't like just to sit in front of a screen and conduct business. But on the other hand, I have to look at the business class, how we are going to fill. And to that, I can tell you that that business class product will fill very quickly because there are people that are longing to travel. They're waiting just for countries to open. And where the countries are open, we see that, as a matter of fact, we have 10 percentage points higher business class occupancy than we had pre-COVID period. So you can see that there is a demand, and I think it will fill. But most importantly, what we have to see is herd immunity, vaccination available to everybody, so that the virus gets weaker, and people then get comfortable to travel. You saw the statistics that you put up, 70% of the people want to travel, but 70% of the people are not going to fill our long-haul flights. So we need to see a way out of it, but I'm confident that business travel and business class occupancy will rise very rapidly once the pandemic is under control.
Luis, what is your expectation?
I fully agree with Akbar that what we see is the high level of pent-up demand. I think business travel will take longer, that is going to come back. We are talking to our customers, we are talking to the different companies, and what we see is that 75% is very similar to the result that you presented before. Have already said that they will fly before the end of the year. Maybe the shape of business travel may change, but as Akbar said, face-to-face meetings are going to be crucial.
But how do you manage the model? I want to just see if we can get that graphic back up again just a moment ago, because what it talked about was more selective trips. There you go, more selective trips than before. So even if we are going to see business travel coming back, but it looks like there will be a reduction. You don't take every business trip, you don't take every meeting face-to-face. How do you change the business model, Luis, if that is going to be the case? Because that is a big profit driver, particularly for IAG.
Yes, in the case of IAG, corporate revenue is around 30% of our total revenue. So I think after this crisis, we need to be more flexible. That is going to be very important. And we need to be leaner. And that's what we are doing. With the retirement of the 747 and 340-600 in Iberia, we have reduced the number of premium seats. And now we have the flexibility to adapt ourselves to the future. So I think that that's going to be very important, to be flexible and before we see what's going to happen.
Dave, does this change the way you build airplanes in terms of the economics? Do you think you're going to be building as many airplanes? Do you think airlines are smaller if business travel is less? One of the things as well that I'd like to ask you about is freight has been the savior in terms of cash flow for many airlines. Do you think freight continues, and do you think you'll be building more freighters?
Yeah, so a couple questions there. Yes, there's been, in my view, a secular lift on freight that will not go away and will continue in light of the world's move toward e-commerce in every way. So I'm optimistic about freight. Tourism, I expect to be as robust as each of our airline leaders have suggested. And finally, on business, I agree with the word selective, but in a very different way. Every business leader would prefer that the business travel that it utilizes is meant to visit customers, external partners, and new constituencies and markets that we've not seen before, and eliminate internal travel. But that is a net gain for travel, and I'm not worried about that. We live on competition. Competition is what drives travel, and I am certain that the business market will also have a robust recovery.
Akbar, let's just talk about what Dave said about freight. He expects freight to remain fairly robust. You are one of the big freight companies in terms of the airline business. Like, do you need more freighters? Do I need to see a 777XF from Dave Calhoun? Do I need to see a 350 a 350F from Fabrice down in Toulouse? What are you looking for? Let's try and get an idea of how strong you think this market is going to be.
As a matter of fact, we have been the largest freight carrier minus FedEx and UPS in the world for the last 2 years, and more so over the pandemic period. We are really hungry for more freighters. Unfortunately, Dave cannot produce for us more 777F. The earliest he can give me is in 2023. And we are very keen to be a launch customer, be it for the 350F or the 777X freighters. We will concentrate in Qatar Airways on air freight as an important part of our total strategy. Of course, but first, we are an airline to carry passengers.
Okay. Well, hopefully we've got some demand there for the airplane. I don't know why I said Fabrice. I think it's Guillaume. I think I'm getting my history mixed up. Let's talk a little bit about where you see the freight market going and the business market going. Luis, do you see freight adding a... Does it compensate? Does it change the mix in terms of what you think the business model looks like? I don't think we can hear Fabrice, unfortunately. Let's go to Yvonne. Yvonne, what does the business model look like differently to you coming out of this crisis? How differently are you going to be doing business, if at all?
Well, as everybody else has mentioned, business will recover. Business travel will recover, but a little bit slower. That's what we're seeing on the African continent. We are seeing a rise in leisure travel as well, as more and more people are getting vaccinated in the US, UK, and Europe. So we are seeing a rise in tourists and the diaspora who've been stuck outside for a very long time, who haven't visited their families. We're seeing a rise in that as well. Cargo will remain strong. We survived the worst of the pandemic by operating cargo-only flights, and we continue to operate a lot of cargo volumes right now. The yields are very high for cargo as well. So right now we're seeing cargo as a percentage of total revenue increasing from what it was pre-pandemic at about 6% to close to 15%. So there is a change there. But we're very optimistic that especially with the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, that we will see a huge rise in business travel, as well as an increase in cargo movement within the continent.
Okay, let's move on to the final area. We've got about 7 minutes left. I want to talk a bit about how the industry emerges from the pandemic in a more sustainable way. Luis, I hope we can hear you now, because this is certainly an area I know that you've been incredibly focused on. We saw this morning the Sustainable Aviation Alliance in the UK putting out some more targets, 10 and 20-year targets in terms of how the industry is going to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. A lot of this relies, though, on offsets. And I'm wondering whether or not the industry is really committed in the way that it should be to trying to accelerate this process. Are offsets good enough?
Oh, I think we have different measures for the short term and also for the long term. In the short term, I think we are investing a lot of money in new aircraft, new technology, the latest technology that we have in the industry now. I think sustainable aviation fuel is going to be critical in the short term. And I think we need to think also in the future with the new technology. I think hydrogen aircraft is something that we can have, but it's going to take time. So it's important the commitment from everybody in the chain. It's not only a question of the airlines. Aviation is true that we are responsible for 2.4% of global emissions, but it's not only a question of airlines. We need the support from the different governments. If we want to put sustainable aviation fuel in our aircraft, we are going to need more plants. We are going to need sustainable aviation fuel at an affordable price. So we need the commitment of everybody in the chain.
Dave, do you think it is possible that the aviation industry can make this move post-crisis? A, with the balance sheets that we have at the moment, and B, we saw the trade deal between the EU and the US the other day, Airbus, Boeing. But government, every airline I talk to talks to me about the fact that government must play a major role in helping the airline industry, helping the aerospace industry make this transition. We've just kind of talked about the fact we're not going to see kind of launch aid and support for the industry, but is that actually, ironically, now actually the biggest thing that we need to see happen within this industry? Government needs to step up and we need to provide support for the way that the industry is going to develop.
Well, I agree with that premise. We're going to need help, but it needs to be informed help. We have a lot of tools to work with between now and 2050, which is sort of the target date for most folks on the subject of sustainability. We have a huge fleet renewal opportunity. Every new airplane, when it displaces an old one, is an incredible jump in emissions efficiency. ATC upgrades will improve that. And then most importantly, as Luis said, sustainable aviation fuel. There are 4 formulas that exist. There are engines that can use it. Boeing is committed that every next airplane that comes out post 2030, and we're already close to that as we speak, will be SAF ready. And then, yes, a combination of airplane manufacturers and propulsion manufacturers agreeing on the best course, and then policymakers stipulating that SAF will begin to penetrate the industry. When that happens, we will get scale, the industry will step up, and we will get to the kind of cost parity that I think Luis, Akbar, and Yvonne are looking for. I don't believe that is a tough path.
Do you need to see governments, though, coordinating this? We've got Europe, we've got the United States, and we've got China. Everybody's going to be on different pages.
That's possible. That's possible. And like our discussion on COVID and protocols internationally, they'll have to come together. I suspect this will be an easier one to come together on than others. And I do think, as you would expect, certain countries, largely Europe, the US, will take lead roles in developing policy around this.
Your Excellency, I'm going to give you the final word on this. Where does Qatar sit on this? Qatar, obviously a huge energy producer, hydrocarbons. What is the mandate you're getting from government in terms of making your airline net neutral?
Well, we are under a lot of pressure from our government to reduce our emissions and to make our aeroplanes very fuel efficient. But at the end of the day, it all depends on the OEMs, on the engine manufacturers, on the aircraft manufacturers, but most importantly, also on the oil companies, because oil companies have invested so much in hydrocarbons, in oil fields, in developments of those oil fields, that now they don't want to spend enough money for the future of our planet. They don't want to invest enough money to produce sustainable fuel at affordable prices. We can invest, like Qatar Airways is investing in state-of-the-art airplanes with 18, 19, 20% fuel efficiency, but we cannot afford or be able to buy volumes of sustainable fuel, which we want to, in order to save our planet and reduce our emissions. So it again boils down to the producers, the oil companies, to invest and make those sustainable fuel available at affordable prices so that we can deliver on the promises we are making to be carbon neutral growth by 2050. I know it is a wishful thinking. 2050 will come very fast, but we need to invest today.
Okay, I've actually got 1 minute left, so I'm going to put the final question to Dave Calhoun. Dave, you've probably got an opening in your lineup to produce another aeroplane to compete potentially with the A320 XLR. How different will that aeroplane be on a sustainable, from a sustainability point of view when we finally get you making that decision?
Well, again, I don't want to predict the time frame around making a decision like that. And when we field a new airplane, I want to make sure that it serves a larger opportunity than just competing against the XLR-F. I'm bullish on this in every way. And one comment I'd like to make is if an airplane comes along in the next 5 or 10 years, its claim to sustainability will have to be built around sustainable aviation fuel. It will not be built around electric or
Yep.
hydrogen or anything of that sort.